You don't lack strength. You lack touch. We've been sold a lie that real masculinity thrives in silence, distance, and emotional repression. Generations of men grew up believing that physical affection was dangerous, that vulnerability was shameful, and that loneliness was simply the price of being strong. But here's the truth. The hidden epidemic of male touch starvation is robbing men of their psychological health, feeding depression, and leaving countless lives marked by isolation and self-sabotage. And the worst part? Most don't even realize what's missing. This isn't about romance. It's about brotherhood, friendship, and the kind of platonic touch that once held entire communities together. From a handshake that turns into a genuine hug, to the simple comfort of a hand on your shoulder, these small moments carry power. They dismantle toxic masculinity, rewrite body language, and remind men that human connection is not weakness, it's oxygen. The reward of embracing it is immediate. Reduced stress, deeper intimacy, and a renewed sense of self-worth. So the question is, are you willing to challenge the script that's kept you isolated? Because once you see how male intimacy has been stolen and how easy it is to reclaim, you'll never look at vulnerability the same way again. This isn't just another theory. It's a path out of loneliness, a doorway to healing trauma, and maybe the first real chance to rebuild what masculinity was always meant to be: human, connected, and whole. Cultural roots of male touch starvation. If you stop and think about it, the story of male intimacy has been rewritten by society in ways most men don't even notice. Centuries ago, it wasn't unusual to see male friendship expressed through physical affection and brotherhood, yet somewhere along the way, societal norms decided that vulnerability through touch was off limits. Masculinity got tangled up with distance, silence, and a rigid image that pushed emotional repression as a standard. A handshake was safe, but a hug? Suddenly, that became a silent signal of weakness. Toxic masculinity took a seat at the table, convincing men that isolation was strength, when in reality, it was starvation of the soul. It's fascinating and tragic how history twisted these ideas. In times of war, men leaned on camaraderie and platonic touch to survive trauma, sharing comfort when words failed. But once peace settled, society demanded that men armor up again, rejecting those same gestures as shameful or inappropriate. Imagine two soldiers holding each other in the trenches, not for romance but for human connection, and then returning home only to learn that same body language would now be judged. That's how the cultural pendulum swung, reinforcing the illusion that self-worth was measured by distance, not closeness. This conditioning seeped into modern masculinity like an invisible ink, shaping generations who learned that loneliness was part of being a man. The idea that comfort or vulnerability could exist in friendship was buried under layers of societal expectations. And so, many grew up equating brotherhood with banner, but never with genuine emotional or physical affection. It became safer to joke than to admit the need for touch, safer to drink together than to embrace. The cultural blueprint left men trapped between craving human connection and fearing the shame that came with asking for it. The result is what we now call male touch starvation, a silent epidemic wrapped in stoic silence. When men avoid platonic touch, not because they don't want it, but because they've been conditioned to fear it, the psychological health of an entire gender takes a hit. It's more than body clock misalignment or fatigue of the soul. It's a subconscious resistance born out of outdated definitions of masculinity. And this resistance doesn't just stop at touch. It bleeds into the way men relate to vulnerability, intimacy, and even their own emotions. Psychological and emotional impact. When men are cut off from platonic touch, the effects don't just skim the surface. They dig deep into the psyche. Loneliness creeps in quietly, turning moment of isolation into a heavy psychological weight that's hard to shake. Emotional repression becomes second nature, leaving vulnerability buried under layers of silence. Without the comfort of human connection, men begin to associate physical affection with shame, often confusing the need for comfort with weakness. It's no wonder that depression and trauma show up when the body is starved of touch. It's not just about warmth. It's about survival. Think of it like this. When a child falls and cries, a hug from a parent doesn't just soothe the body, it calms the nervous system. But for men taught to avoid vulnerability, that same comfort is denied in adulthood. The lack of platonic touch isn't neutral. It rewires the brain, fostering negative thought patterns that whisper, "You're alone, you're unwanted." Studies link this deprivation directly to anxiety, low self-worth, and even chronic fatigue, because the body responds to emotional hunger as if it were physical hunger. Touch is medicine, and without it, the wounds stay open. The psychological health toll is subtle at first. A man may brush off feelings of overwhelm or avoidance, convincing himself that solitude is strength. Yet deep inside, unconscious fear is steering his behavior, leading to self-sabotage in relationships and friendships. Emotional exhaustion builds slowly, making every morning routine feel heavier, as if dread is stitched into the fabric of daily life. That subconscious resistance doesn't vanish. It compounds, shaping a distorted sense of masculinity where comfort and intimacy are treated as luxuries instead of essentials. And the truth is, this lack of comfort doesn't just hurt the individual, it echoes outward, affecting how men show up in the world. A man deprived of healthy touch is less likely to open up, less likely to risk vulnerability, and more likely to suffer in silence. He might laugh with friends but avoid real brotherhood, or love deeply but keep his partner at arm's length. Over time, that isolation becomes a cage, and the keys to freedom, vulnerability, comfort, and platonic touch remain hidden. But the deeper question is, how does this silence affect not just men individually, but the very fabric of society itself? Consequences in relationships and society. When men grow up fearing vulnerability and avoiding platonic touch, the fallout is bigger than most realize. Intimacy doesn't just struggle in romantic partnerships. It often collapses under the weight of emotional repression. A man who has internalized shame around physical affection might love deeply, but still hold back, creating distance with his partner. His body language speaks volumes. Stiff hugs, rare caresses, guarded eyes. What seems like avoidance of touch is really a symptom of loneliness and isolation, born from societal norms that punish vulnerability and rewarded emotional distance. Friendships take the hit too. Many male friendships remain trapped at surface level, built around sports, jokes, or work, but rarely stepping into deeper human connection. Without the comfort of platonic touch or the safety to show vulnerability, brotherhood becomes a performance of masculinity rather than a true exchange of self-worth. Think about it. Two friends might sit side by side in silence, both craving comfort, yet unable to reach out with something as simple as a reassuring hand on the shoulder. That silence grows heavier with time, turning companionship into quiet isolation. And this isn't just about individual suffering. It's a social epidemic. When men are disconnected from their emotions and each other, entire communities become fragmented. Neighborhoods, workplaces, even families feel the absence of real connection. The effects ripple outward. Depression, trauma, and self-sabotage don't remain private. They create societal patterns where men withdraw instead of engaging. This avoidance of vulnerability becomes a cultural script, teaching the next generation of boys to repeat the cycle of toxic masculinity, perpetuating dread, and fatigue in silence. The bigger tragedy? Society loses out on the power of true brotherhood. A culture where men fear platonic touch is a culture that suppresses psychological health and human connection. The result is a collective existential crisis, where men feel unseen, women carry the burden of being their only source of comfort, and children grow up modeling the same resistance. The cage of isolation doesn't just lock men in, it starves communities of compassion. But what happens if we decide to break this cycle, to redefine masculinity and vulnerability as strengths instead of flaws? Breaking the cycle of touch starvation. To break free from the silent epidemic, masculinity itself needs a new definition, one that sees vulnerability and physical affection not as weaknesses, but as signs of strength. Men who dare to embrace comfort, to express brotherhood through platonic touch, are not less masculine. They are more complete. Imagine a father hugging his grown son without shame, or two friends clasping each other tightly after years apart. These moments rebuild a foundation of human connection. By challenging toxic masculinity, men reclaim their self-worth and redefine what it means to truly embody strength. Safe spaces are essential for this transformation. Picture community groups, men's circles, or even fitness spaces where vulnerability is encouraged rather than mocked. Instead of avoiding touch, men can experience it as a natural extension of friendship and intimacy. This isn't about forcing physical affection, but about creating environments where comfort flows without fear of judgment. Just like therapy offers tools for healing trauma, these spaces offer a practical cure for loneliness and emotional exhaustion. They remind men that brotherhood and psychological health are not luxuries. They are lifelines. Education plays a crucial role in dismantling subconscious resistance. Teaching young boys that body language can express warmth without shame, that human connection is vital to psychological health, changes everything. Parents can model affection openly. Schools can normalize discussions about vulnerability, and society can highlight examples of healthy masculinity in media. Books like The Boy Crisis by Warren Farrell or Boys and Men by Richard Reeves offer insights into how redefining masculinity impacts both individuals and communities. Learning becomes a bridge between isolation and self-discovery. And yet, the real shift begins in everyday life. It's in a morning routine where a man chooses to hug his child a little longer, or the moment he allows himself to lean on a friend instead of hiding behind avoidance. It's in the subtle rejection of negative thought patterns and the conscious embrace of vulnerability as freedom. Breaking the cycle of touch starvation is not just about men. It's about rewiring entire communities. And when men step into this new definition of strength, society as a whole discovers that the antidote to loneliness has been in our arms all along. The truth is, no change happens until a man decides he's tired of living in isolation. Loneliness and emotional repression may have been handed down by societal norms, but they don't have to be carried forever. The antidote is simple, yet radical. Embrace vulnerability, welcome platonic touch, and reclaim human connection without shame. Ask yourself, how many times have you avoided comfort because you thought it would make you look weak? And how much longer are you willing to let toxic masculinity dictate the quality of your psychological health? The challenge now is personal. What if, starting today, you chose to break the silence? A hug with a friend, a longer embrace with your child, or even joining spaces where men gather not to posture, but to connect. Each act rewires not just your body, but your soul. Trauma loses its grip when comfort enters the room. Depression eases when brotherhood is restored. And every time you allow yourself to be vulnerable, You chip away at the cage of isolation that's kept you stuck. So here's the invitation. Don't just watch this and nod along, live it. Start practicing touch, practice vulnerability, practice connection, rebuild friendships, strengthen intimacy, and remind yourself that self-worth isn't about distance, it's about closeness. And if you're ready to keep walking this path, learning, healing, and transforming, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join a community that refuses to accept loneliness as normal. The epidemic of male touch starvation ends when you decide to take the first step